Browning. I'm on the board for the Freedom Heritage Museum. Where'd she go? Jennifer? The lady who was helping me is Dr. Browning's wife, Jennifer. So she does a lot of work for us when we have events and things like that. Where she went. Anyway,
She's coming around.
there she is. There she is. This is Jennifer. We'd like to welcome you to the Freedom Heritage Museum. This is we're still in our initial stages of development, but as you can see, we do have some things in our hangar. We have a couple of rooms in the back that you can walk through when I'm finished. But other than that, any questions before I get started? Can everybody hear? I'm like, good, good. All right. Well, as you know, you're in Evansville, Indiana. And 75 years ago, before World War II, Evansville was like a small town on the Ohio River, about 97,000 in population. The unemployment rate coming off the Depression was around 10-15%. Not much going on, and there were rumors that some of the factories might be laying off that year. But then, as you know, December 7th, Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and World War II would come to America and change Evansville. But then Evansville would help to change the world, because Franklin Delano Roosevelt, there's a picture of him back there, and I'll explain that picture, and not come back. So we lost about 10% of the soldiers that we sent over there. From the supply standpoint, that's where Evansville kicked in big time, because thousands of people would come to Evansville to work in the defense factories. We had two huge factories come to Evansville. I'll talk about each of them in a minute, that were built from scratch. But over probably up to 100 or more local businesses retrofitted their equipment and machinery to help produce over $600 million in defense contract materials. Over 330 different products were made. I have over here, if anyone is interested, is a list of some of those they were doing here. It didn't happen overnight, though. The political, the labor, and a lot of the leaders here in Evansville spent most of 1940-41 laying the groundwork, because they knew something was coming. They knew supplies were going to be needed. And by the time we were in World War II, the groundwork had been laid. So by March of 1942, over $600 million in defense contracts had been awarded to the city of Evansville. So that's a lot. Our manufacturing workforce before the war was around 18,000 people. During the peak, in around 1944, the manufacturing sales force was around 80,000. So you can see that's a big jump, the population and what was going on here in the city. So a lot of things happened, and they happened in a short period of time. Now, the first big contract that we got was the shipyard. And that one was announced on February 14th of 1942. And within a couple of months, they would take 44 acres on right on the Ohio River and start building immediately. By October of that year, the first LST came off the ways, down the ways. And every one of the LSTs, we produced 167 LSTs. And every one of them got a launching ceremony. So as they're coming down off the ways, a local choir would sing the national anthem followed by Old Man River. I mean, imagine how impressive that must have been, watching this huge ship coming down and being launched into the river and hearing somebody sing Old Man River in the background. I've got some. These, I think, at the bottom of the ways that had just been launched. And you see in the back, let me see, in the background.
I got to work there for a while.
Did you really? Yeah. In the background here, these are ships that have been launched and are being fitted. So there were actually two separate ceremonies. The first one was when the ship was coming down off the ways. That was the launching ceremony with the champagne and you know, the whole 9 yards. And all of the employees, for example, of the employees trying to find places to sit and watch as this ship is going down the ramp. At its peak, the shipyard had around 19,000 employees. As you can imagine, security would have been tight.
how long did it take them from beginning to end to make one?
Well, and it's similar to Republic. Excuse me. The more they did it, the better they got. So the first one, the first keel was laid in June and it was launched in October. And they probably improved that as time went on. Republic went on to produce 6,700 Thunderbolt planes. And by the time they were done, they were producing 10 planes a day. And they were just learning as they went along to make these. You see these buildings here, those are the stations. They all had badges. So you can imagine the security was probably very high. In fact, anybody from Evansville?
Yeah,
Raise your hand. Okay, you know Wrights Hill. Mm-hmm. So it's in the background. In fact, you can see it in some of these pictures. It's called, it was probably about less than a mile from the shipyard. And you can see it because it's along a hill and there's a high school. It's one of our local high schools that's up there. The military wanted to shut down the high school. And the local politicians said, no, we don't think that's going to be necessary. There was enough security around the shipyard itself that they thought that they should be okay. It's about a German spy who was actually sent by Hitler. She got a job at the shipyard, and she had two missions. One was to find out about the LST and get some information about how it was being built and that type of thing. The other was to find out where they were going to go in France and find out what she could about the invasion in France. She did, according to the book, manage to get the information, but in her attempt to escape, she had to swim across the Ohio River, and she left all those documents in her car, which was stuck here in Evansville. So she didn't get away with it. But it's a very interesting book if you have worries about what she did when she was here in Evansville. Anyway, as you can imagine, it probably took about over an hour for the ships to change, to have to go through each one of these stations.
Were the shifts 8 hours or 10 hours?
I think it depended. As you know, like the soldiers, there's no vacation in the defense plants, and you worked every day, no holidays. So this went on for what, 3, 4, almost 5 years these people were working, and some people would work double shifts to kind of help out and to make more money. That many people coming to our city all at one time, you can imagine it brought some social problems to the city of Evansville. One of them was, how do we educate the children of all these people who were coming, because our schools were built for the population that we had, not the extra 50, 60,000 that joined us. Another big area was, how are we going to house all these people? We didn't have the housing made. A lot of it was built up in like another year or two. I mean, a lot of temporary places for people to come and live. There probably wasn't an empty bedroom in the city of Evansville that wasn't being rented out at the time. I'm sure a lot of the women were working that normally wouldn't have worked before the war. So watching the kids while the ladies were working was an issue.
I know. Can't hear. I know. Excuse me.
Can you hear?
Not real well.
Okay. My grandparents both worked. One worked at Republic, the other worked at the shipyard, and they had 3 children. And they sent them to live with some family in Illinois for 2 years while they were holding down these jobs here in Evansville during the war. So it's very interesting. This is another photograph of LSTs being assembled. Huge ships. Somebody commented about the Higgins belt there. They said it's kind of small for an LST. That's not actually an LST. 6 of those would hang during the war. Do you remember anything about the LST? I know sometimes...
I just helped unload one in Marseille.
Upload one? We've got some really great photographs of LSTs. So like I said, some of them couldn't come all the way up, but if they could get close enough, the soldiers would build dirt ramps to connect so that soldiers could come right from the LST. In fact, you were going to tour LST 325 today. I have a photograph of that one. I don't have it here with me. of German prisoners of war coming off of it at one time. We have a Camp Breckenridge was just about 30 miles south of here, and there were some German POWs that were sent to Camp Breckenridge. Any questions about the shipyard? I'm going to need access to this. Yes. A lot of companies here in Evansville. We had a couple of steel companies that were producing parts. It's kind of interesting because, like Servell produced refrigerators before the war, and during the war they built parts for the Thunderbolt planes, like the wings and things like that. So a lot of the local companies, I don't think steel was an issue. In fact, I have a story about that when I get to Republic. Let me see if I.
Question.
Yes.
Are you gonna talk about what happened to the town here after 1944 or 1940?
About the opportunities that these defense contracts created for the ladies here, and I've got some great examples of some of the work that they were given, minorities and handicapped. I've got a photograph of someone who was handicapped working. So there were a lot of opportunities coming home, and now they needed the jobs.
So the town must have experienced a huge
Yes.
depression after the war.
Yes, yes.
One of the things I know was done here was you built the Sears Roebuck refrigerators
Whirlpool was here.
after the war.
Yeah.
Because I used to ship plastic parts to Evansville.
Okay. Whirlpool is what was Republic
It was Republic.
Republic Aviation.
My wife and another girl, Betty Butch, took checks to all the people in the ship. But they told them, said, do not go below.
Do not what?
Go below.
On the LST.
It's dangerous. down
Oh, yeah.
there. So they didn't go.
Yeah, we have photographs of some of the female welders that would be underneath, and riveters who would be underneath doing riveting, and then there would be an equal number on the top that would be riveting. So a lot of females, probably at least over 50% of the workers were female. So it was great opportunities. In fact, in 3 different positions, across in front of you as if on a table, up and down as if on a wall, and above. Very difficult to do. And apparently she was very famous.
Isn't she still alive?
I don't know.
I'm thinking I saw her at that artifact show down
Really?
at
I do not know.
they were talking to her in there.
There was a big celebration for the 1000th Thunderbolt. It was called I think it was the Tojo Special. And it was kind of like the shipyard, when all the employees were in one area. So they had all the Republic folks. There was cake for everybody, and they had a big celebration. Like I said, they would go on to build 6,700 of these planes.
I was in Camp
Imagine.
I couldn't do it.
So I mentioned Camp Breckenridge, and he said he was actually stationed there. Another interesting bit of trivia. We had a lot of soldiers coming in, and we had a USO. We had one of the best USOs in the country because it was free. They didn't charge for the food or anything.
They didn't charge anywhere, any place we've ever been,
Really?
and still don't.
Yeah, they swept you, and they switched over to the war.
Well, I'm talking about when they all let out here and there together.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah, they hired a lot of
It's bad. It's bad now.
Stuck in the middle of all the people.
Yeah, it's like a traffic jam.
Yeah.
These days when you're sitting out there, but interesting. Oh, the Midwest Defense Factories. Now, he didn't like to walk in public on crutches or in his wheelchair. He didn't want to be seen. So it was done by train or by car. And he was in that car as it drove through the factory, the Republic factory. And what you see there is a lady handing him a model of the Thunderbolt. He signed the register CNC, Commander-in-Chief. We're trying to get one for our museum, but there are only 7 of the thousands and thousands that were made. There are only 7 left that are actually flyable. One of them, I don't know if anybody saw it, on Memorial Weekend this year took a dive in the Hudson River. Anybody see that? They got it out, but I'm sorry, the pilot died, but they did manage to get the plane.
Maybe that would be for sale then.
Yeah, we'll see. No, they are.
No, they got that.
They're very expensive to purchase. They're like millions of dollars. And then, of course, there's the cost to keeping it maintained. I mean, the planes out there alone are expensive to insure and, to make sure that they're in working order. So it's very difficult, but it's one of the things that we're working on. So I talked about Republic and I talked about the shipyard, both that were created from scratch at the beginning of the war. But like I said, there were hundreds of other companies here in Evansville that produced a lot of different things. We had a company called American Fork and Hoe that produced items like this hatchet here in Evansville. And then we had a clothing manufacturer, Shane Manufacturing, that produced uniforms for soldiers. And this is the protective cover that they produced for that.
What did they use the hatchet for?
Standard issue for combat troops.
My dad had one in New Guinea and they issued them for Guadalcanal.
Yeah.
Pacific War Theater.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever.
Yeah.
The,
Of course, they were used for, not only for cutting, but for pounding. The heel was used to drive the tennis boats into hard soil, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, we had two companies before the war, Sunbeam and, my mind just went blank. Chrysler. Chrysler produced Plymouths here in Evansville, and they would ship them down the river on river boats. And Sunbeam produced refrigerators. That's what they did before the war. But they got contracts to produce, at the beginning of the war, ammunition. And they became caliber bullets for the war. The contract was to produce a lot of ammunition in a fast period of time, because there was some fear that our eastern and western shores might be open to invasion. And they wanted to make sure that not only did we have the ammunition for our soldiers, but that they had ammunition to protect our shores. They produced over 500 million 30 caliber bullets. Now here's one of those 45 caliber bullets. There's an interesting story about these bullets. Now remember, 3.2 billion. If you laid these end to end, it would go around the earth 2.8 times. That's how many bullets that is.
Is that the casing and everything?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm going to talk about, is the casing. Before the war and even now, what's the normal metal that you would use to case? Anybody know? Brass. Brass.
Oh, brass, yeah.
Yeah,
those
brass.
are-
During the war,
Those are steel.
yes, these are steel, because during the war, brass was in short supply.
Steel rusted, though.
steel rusted.
Yeah.
Steel rusted.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't feed the magazine.
Really?
Oh, that's right.
Well, I carried a grease gun which had 2 clips of 30.
Uh-huh.
And you'd have to take them out every once in a while, clean them up and oil them and stick them back in.
It was something that hadn't been done before the war, but the military said, we don't have enough brass to make all this ammunition, so we need to find a way to do it using metal, and they did. They produced them in metal. And they would normally have been shipped to the troops in boxes, small boxes that were sealed in like waxed paper. But MacArthur, General MacArthur said, my troops are in the Pacific, and there's a lot of humidity and there's a lot of water, and boxes aren't going to do it. I need this to be waterproof for these soldiers. And so that's when they came up with the metal canisters that they put the ammunition in. So this is how it was shipped to the Pacific Islands, was in these canisters, but they had to be waterproof. And we had to find a way to test to make sure these boxes were waterproof. And a local engineer, born and raised here in Evansville, invented a machine called the vacuuvator. And the canisters would go through the vacuuvator in some kind of a liquid solution, and if bubbles came up, then they would know that it wasn't waterproof and it would be taken out. But that's how they knew. These are some ladies sorting through
One by one?
Yeah,
What are they sorting for?
I don't know.
Defects.
Yeah, I'm sure defects or something.
Get rid of that.
These ladies are manning stretching machines, cartridge stretching machines.
What machine?
They were called stretching machines. They would
Stretching.
stretch the cartridges,
What do
yes.
they stretch?
The cartridge.
The cartridges.
It is rather,
That's interesting.
And this photograph is of cans going through the assembly line, being washed and prepared for the ammunition. Now, the ordnance plant produced, they didn't actually produce it, they retrofitted another product. Anyone in this room know what it is? I heard, if anyone, the
Tanks.
Tanks. Sherman tanks. So this is the yard behind the Chrysler plant where over 400 tanks were sitting, being ready to ship over to Europe.
How did they
The
go?
Chrysler, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, they look like Ford. Yeah, this, the flat,
These were retrofitted tanks. I think they didn't actually build them from scratch.
oh,
They were actually tanks that had been used elsewhere and were retrofitted for the war.
Refurbished.
Yes.
How did they ship them? Down to Ohio, down to Mississippi, and
It's
to New
possible,
Orleans, or what?
yeah. That was one of the reasons why Evansville got a lot of the contracts, because of its location here in the Midwest, so there was less
They're gonna get some
fear.
more too.
Pardon?
Yeah, they're gonna get some more.
Yeah.
More contracts.
Evansville?
What was
That'd be
that?
nice. He said Evansville's about to get some more contracts. Now, these are, they would, 30 miles they would take them to make sure that these tanks. Now, here are some men in front of a tank getting ready to test drive some of the tanks. But these gentlemen weren't from Chrysler. For some reason, one day, some Republic pilots came over and did some test driving of the tanks. These ladies are working a machine at Servelle. These are cannons. The lady on your left is running the machine. The lady on the right is testing for burrs at the top. And I mentioned handicapped. The lady on the right is blind. So she's using her fingers to test for those burrs.
Ah! How come, did she cut her hand?
Sure she did. Quite a percentage on 30.
We've got some local historians who have been researching Evansville's history during the war, and we've been fortunate enough, there's not a lot of written text, because of the security around the shipyard and Republic Aviation. A lot of the information was destroyed after the war, but we have thousands of photographs from our local newspaper and Willard Library, which is a huge library close to the center of town. And a lot of the photographs, our historians managed to go and find them. And these are two books that you could find on Amazon.com, both about Evansville during World War II. This one is written by a professor at the University of Evansville. I also mentioned Mike Wicker wrote that novel about the German spy, that's Invitation to Valhalla. And these books are a little harder to find, but they have some incredible photographs in them. They're about Evansville and some of the products that were produced here in World War II. But you can see there's just a lot of great photographs in these books. Let me tell you a little bit more about and make accessible get my glasses, the objects produced by the folks here in Evansville and the personal accounts of those folks here in Evansville and our veterans coming back from World War II. I understand Dr. Browning was videotaping some stories last night. We want the future generations of Evansville and the tri-state and wherever to become educated about these efforts and the sacrifices that people like you made, so that we can remember and honor you for protecting the freedoms that we have today. And what we do is we ask folks who come to our museum, or when we go out and do talks, if you have anything in your attic or your basement, or if you know of anybody that might have something like that hatchet that you would like to donate to the museum, we'd love to have it. We're still creating the museum. putting it together. You see a lot of uniforms around. You didn't come through the front door, but I don't know, let me show you this.
There's how many years he has.
Three.
Is that the 3rd Division, Marine Division, the Marine Division?
Third Army.
Exactly like
Third Army.
that. Yeah.
That's Patton's division.
Really?
They're all-
Wow.
Third Army.
They were all Patton's Division before.
Yeah, that's what I
That's what he thought.
Because the
That's what he thought.
14th was the last one that were saved. He joined, Patton picked us up the last week of the war, and that old SOB didn't have enough time to give us hell.
Yeah, he did.
He's not very popular here.
I guess so. Now, the display cases behind you are some personal effects from a couple of the soldiers from Evansville that were donated to us. But it's amazing, some of the things that, I mean, notebooks, log books from pilots. On the top of the case over there are, you know, those little, you see these on movies sometimes, the cards that were used to identify planes, enemy planes, vulnerable to ammunition as it was coming towards the shore. So they had to be careful about that. Any questions? Yes.
It may be obvious, but there's a very important concept that's behind this. You realize that the LSTs are ocean-going vessels. It was important they had to be built so you could get them to the sea. So you think of your shipyards as being on the coast and the launching into the ocean. Where is the ocean?
There's not.
At Evansville.
No.
Yet the draft is what, I think 12 feet?
Right.
The inland, so you had to have shallow water normally would preclude the building of anything that was ocean going. But the Midwest was involved in 2 major seagoing building activities. One, in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, submarines were built and sent down the Mississippi to the sea.
Right?
But most important here, various shipbuilding yards here on the Ohio River, which didn't have deep draft for oceans, were able to build the LSTs, and that's why this is one of the sites, is because it had enough water, enough draft, that they could do the big ships with dozens of troops on or equipment. And it often gets overlooked the importance of the inland waterways for these 2 types of vehicles that were seagoing, but still could be built and extend the capacity for navigational shipbuilding by these yards like here and like the yards at Manitowoc for submarines.
And to his point, you know, we produced the Thunderbolts, we produced the LSTs, 2 huge contributors to World War II to help our soldiers win those wars. The Thunderbolt was designed not for fighter activity originally because it's a bigger, heavier plane, but they found that it could sustain a lot of damage because other planes were water cooled, and so if there was any damage, that caused a problem. But the Thunderbolt was air cooled, and they had 18 pistons, and if 3 of them were shot out, you could still fly the plane. I have a couple of photographs of a couple of planes that were shot out pretty bad, and they still managed to get them back to base. The pilots used to say, if you want to impress a girl, you could fly a Spitfire, but if you wanted to come home to a girl, you fly a Thunderbolt.
Did they use them in the Navy also or not?
The Thunderbolts?
Yeah. I know
Oh,
they
I
had
think
them
the Navy had them on aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
Aircraft carriers, yeah, I was wondering.
My dad was a mechanic in New Guinea, and they brought them off the carriers in to be repaired and sent them back. And the Thunderbolt, P-51 was all the Navy planes were going in and out of there constantly. And yes, they were on aircraft
Yeah,
carriers.
that's what I thought.
The P-47 had a lot of armor for both the pilot and engine and the vitals because it was a big airplane and could haul it. They had to limit that in somewhat in the 51s. He was still protected by armor, but not nearly as much as the 47 had.
Oh.
I have a chart that compares, I need to have this blown up so people can see it. But it has 4 of the planes, you can't actually read this from where you're sitting. P-47, Spitfire Zero, and a Messerschmitt, and sort of compares them. The length of a P-47 was 36 feet. The other 3 were around that 29 feet. The wingspan was over 40 feet, and it was between 36, 32, 39 for the others. The maximum weight for the Thunderbolt was 17,500 pounds loaded. The others were 6,700, 5,300, 7,500. So it was a big, sturdy plane.
Do you know
Bombs,
anything
2,500
about-
pounds in bombs.
Do you know anything about 6 Thunderbolts being acquired by the Germans, captured late in the war in the spring?
No, I don't.
Because I was in an armored column with these guys, and if somebody here was there, I'd like to hear from him. And 6 of them came overhead with black slashes across, painted over the white stars, very crudely. And there was a road, and they went around and lined up with the road. We had these big colored panels out identifying us as Allied troops.
Mm-hmm.
And when they lined up with the road, I realized they were going to strafe us. So I dove down these stone steps head first. I got my first war wound. The 50s never hit me, but they hit the concrete. Chips of concrete flew. One of them took out a tiny bit of my cuticle, like a fingernail scissor. I bled 2 drops of blood, which I sucked out my mouth. That was my wound.
That's a good one. Everybody should have been that lucky.
I opened fire on.
I was there that same day, and I saw him coming down the road.
You did? Oh, I'm not
And
dreaming.
I drove for a cellar window.
Like me.
My helmet wouldn't go through it. So I laid there, it didn't matter. He went right overhead anyway. But down the road, they got a shot into a tank because the hatches were put, and they killed the guy in the tank.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
Luckily, it's almost impossible to hit a guy on the ground flying, even though I think they had 8 guns, 4 in each wing.
Yeah. I see.
Well, I got
Yeah,
involved
8.
same
Guys
thing
were
on-
there.
Yes,
I
they
thought
had-
it's been a
Larry, what were you saying?
I said I was in the same situation. I was in half tracks for lined up, and I stayed with the half track because I was anti-tank gunner. And these planes come whipping down through there and opened fire with 50 caliber, and they veered off. And they said it was captured American planes that had been captured, but
Yeah, they were in that period there, and that was like the 20th or 23rd of March, 45.
It was the spring. I remember it was a beautiful day.
Well, you're welcome to walk through the museum. We can show you some of the rooms if anybody's interested. And there's a flag out in the hangar. It has 48 stars on it, because that's how many states that we had during World War II.